Why are you even breathing in my house?" Evelyn's voice hissed like a snake ready to strike. Before Grace could react, the first slap landed. Her cheek burned. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she didn't cry aloud. She had learned that tears were dangerous here. Her older brother, Michael, froze in the hallway, unsure whether to intervene. Her younger sister, Anita, whispered, "Mama, please, she didn't do anything." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Silence. "You think anyone cares for her?" She asked for this. Grace was a quiet, resilient girl living in the chaotic streets of the city. Her family was small. Grace's life was a daily battlefield. Her father, Anthony, worked far away, sending money and gifts occasionally, never noticing the bruises, the hollow look, the silent prayers for safety. Her siblings were treated with love, care, and patience. Grace got nothing but hatred. And a mother, Evelyn, whose hatred for Grace was unmatched. While her mother doted on her other children, Grace endured a life of cruelty, neglect, and unimaginable punishment. Every day was a test of survival, every night a lesson in fear. Yet, Grace's spirit, though battered, remained unbroken. She learned to endure, to watch, to calculate, and in the shadow of her mother's cruelty, a fire was quietly growing. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more urban African folktales. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story, and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts, because your voice matters in every tale we tell. It happened one afternoon. Grace was carrying a plate of food for her siblings when her hand slipped. The plate clattered to the floor, shattering in pieces. Evelyn's face twisted. "Do you know what this is?" she screamed, grabbing a bucket. Grace froze, heart hammering. "Mama, I'm sorry." But Evelyn had already mixed water with ground pepper and poured it over her head. Grace coughed violently. Her eyes burned. She stumbled back, slipping on the wet floor. "Beg," Evelyn snapped. "Beg me to stop, if you can." Grace whispered softly, I'm sorry, Mama. Begging won't save you. You are poison in this house," Evelyn spat. Outside, neighbors whispered among themselves. "That woman, she's a witch. Look at what she does to her own child." Grace curled into a corner. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten in 2 days because Evelyn had decided she didn't deserve food. She whispered to herself, "Why am I the one she hates? Did I do something wrong before I was even born?" One Monday morning, Grace forgot to sweep under the dining table properly. 3 days of punishment followed, locked in a dark, damp storage room. The cement floor was cold, and the silence was suffocating. She pressed herself into a corner, tears soaking her dirt-stained clothes. Outside, neighbors pounded on the door. "Evelyn, open that door. She deserves this," Evelyn shouted back. "She is a punishment, not my child." Grace pleaded, her voice breaking, "Mama, please, I want to go to school. I promise I will work hard." Evelyn's lips curled in a cruel smile. Learn to embarrass me like you do every day. No, you will stay here and suffer. You are useless." And so Grace learned her lessons from pain, not books. She swept, cooked, and endured while her siblings walked to school. At a neighborhood festival, Evelyn dragged Grace to the center of the crowd. "Look at this child," she shouted. "She deserves nothing. Not love, not education, not life. Children laughed. Adults whispered. Grace burned with shame. She wanted to shrink into the ground, but she stayed silent. Silence became her shield. She realized that in this house, to speak was to invite more pain. By the time Grace turned 16, Evelyn's cruelty had escalated. One rainy evening, she called Grace into the living room, her eyes sharp and cold. "You think you are clever," Evelyn hissed. "You think you can escape me. Tonight, you will learn your place." From the shadows of the hallway, 3 street boys appeared. Everyone in the neighborhood knew them, petty thieves and troublemakers. Evelyn smiled cruelly. "Teach her what happens when she crosses me." Grace's stomach twisted. She tried to plead. "Mama, please, Silence. You are worthless. You deserve lessons." The boys lunged. Grace didn't fight. She ran. She twisted, ducked, slipped through narrow gaps, and darted past crates and street vendors. Rain soaked her hair and clothes, but she ran until she found refuge in an abandoned warehouse. Shivering and bruised, she whispered to herself, "I will survive. No one, not even my mother, will break me. If the world throws fire, I will walk through it and come out stronger." And from that night, Grace learned a powerful truth. Survival was not about her mother's mercy. It was about her own courage and wits. Anthony, her father, came home sometimes. Always with gifts. Never noticing the bruises, the hollow look, or the silent suffering. "Grace, here's some money for you," he said once, smiling faintly. "Thanks, Papa," Grace whispered. If only he had been here, maybe life would have been different. But he wasn't, and Grace knew she had only herself. Even small joys were forbidden. One evening, she tried to laugh quietly with David, a friend from the street. Evelyn overheard. "Your laughter is poison," she screamed, slapping Grace with all the force of decades of hatred. From that day, Grace learned the final lesson: joy was a crime. Silence was survival. Friendships outside the house were forbidden. "The world will ruin you faster than I can. Stay inside, or I will ruin you myself," Evelyn warned. Grace nodded silently. Hatred burned quietly inside her, a fire she could not extinguish. Daily, she cooked, cleaned, and worked while her siblings rested. "You are not useful. Comfort is for those who deserve it," Evelyn reminded her. Grace endured, burying pain deep inside. She learned to anticipate danger, read people, and move quietly. Every humiliation became a lesson. Even when she returned late from errands, carrying heavy pots under the hot sun, Evelyn watched with satisfaction. Grace said nothing. She had mastered patience and cunning. By 16, Grace was no longer a frightened girl. She had learned the streets, learned patience, learned to survive. She often escaped to the bustling streets to breathe, the market smells, honking cars, children playing, street hawkers shouting, reminders that life existed beyond Evelyn's hatred. And then came the night that changed everything. The night the street boys came, sent by her mother to hurt her, and Grace survived. She sat in the dark warehouse, rain dripping down her face, realizing, "I will survive. I will not break. And one day, everything will change." Grace had grown taller, stronger, and wiser. The little girl who once feared her mother's shadow was gone. In her place was a young woman shaped by cruelty, survival, and quiet determination. By 20, her body was strong, her mind sharp. Evelyn noticed the change. Her sharp eyes narrowed. This child, she is no longer small. I must control her, Evelyn muttered, pacing the house. Grace only smiled faintly, her patience sharpening her like a blade. She no longer reacted with fear. Every word, every move, every silence was calculated. Grace spent her days working silently, and her nights watching. She studied Evelyn. When she left the house, how she moved, who she trusted, what doors were locked, and when the neighbors patrolled. She saved small amounts of money secretly, bought supplies quietly, and thought through every step of what she would do. Grace wasn't angry. She was patient, strategic, ready. Even when her father, Anthony, visited briefly, she did not run to him. She watched him with quiet detachment as he handed gifts to her siblings. If only you had been here all these years, she thought, but she dismissed it. The girl who needed him was gone. The woman he saw before him now carried something he could not understand, a fire born of survival. Evelyn, sensing Grace's growing confidence, became unpredictable. Locked doors, starvation, beatings, all escalated. You dare. Evelyn spat one afternoon when Grace failed to prepare a meal on time. I do not need your approval, Grace said softly. I am alive because of my patience, not because of you. Evelyn's hand trembled. For the first time, she realized her daughter was beyond control. Grace often escaped to the streets to breathe. The markets, children playing with old tires, street hawkers shouting, all reminded her that life existed beyond Evelyn's hatred. She became keen, observing people, learning to move unnoticed, and manipulating situations subtly. Survival had become a skill, honed long before she turned 20. Even fear has a weakness, she thought, and it can be turned into strength. One late afternoon, Evelyn bragged to the neighbors again. No one can break me. That child is mine, and I control her. Grace waited silently, hidden. Evelyn was distracted, sweeping the floor, unaware of the shadow moving behind her. Grace entered the kitchen with a calm precision only years of fear and survival could teach. She mixed the chemical into a glass of water, ordinary, tempting, and deadly. When she placed it before Evelyn, the older woman laughed, mocking her daughter. You think you can outsmart me? Grace's voice was soft but filled with iron. I survived everything you gave me. I am not afraid of you anymore. Evelyn sipped, then convulsed, gasping, screaming. You cannot do this, she croaked. I already have, Grace said, steady and cold. Neighbors rushed in, shouting and pointing, but Grace did not resist. She stood pale, calm, composed, a decade of hatred, survival, and calculated patience distilled into one silent figure. The police arrived quickly. Grace let them take her without a word. Her silence said more than any confession could. The court was merciless. Her history of abuse, pepper water, starvation, public humiliation, was noted, but the law could not ignore the act itself. Grace was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Sitting in her cold, silent cell, she reflected. She had survived years of cruelty, and she had acted, even if the cost was her freedom. I became what my mother created, she thought. She hated me, starved me, humiliated me, and in doing so, she prepared me for the only act left to survive her memory. Even behind bars, Grace knew a truth her mother never understood. The world had taught her lessons no school ever could. I am free in my mind, even if not in body, she whispered. Just then, a gentle knock came at the visiting window. One of her mother's old friends stepped in, an older woman with weary eyes and a soft, sorrowful smile. She held a small bag of food and sat across from Grace, placing it carefully on the table. Grace, the woman began, her voice trembling slightly. I need to tell you something. Something your mother never said. Something she never told anyone, not even you. Grace looked up slowly, her heart thudding. What is it? She asked quietly, her voice barely audible. The woman sighed, gathering courage. Do you know why your mother hated you so much? Grace shook her head, a cold pit forming in her stomach. No. I've spent my whole life wondering. I tried to be good, I never understood. The woman reached across the table, placing a trembling hand over Grace's. It started long before you were even born. Your mother, she went through so much while carrying you. She lost both of her parents in tragic accidents within months of each other. She was alone, grieving, and expecting a child. She lost the people who loved her, her family, and she carried that pain into her pregnancy with you. Grace felt a lump in her throat, tears threatening to spill, but she stayed silent, listening. And then, the woman continued, her voice cracking, your father's business collapsed. Money vanished. Security vanished. She watched the world she knew crumble, all while carrying you. She blamed herself for not being able to stop it. She blamed your birth, even though it wasn't your fault. And during childbirth, she had complications. Complications that left her unable to feel sexual desire ever again. That wound, that loss, she carried every day. Every time she looked at you, she was reminded of everything she had lost, everything that went wrong while she carried you. Grace's chest tightened. The weight of years of abuse pressed down on her again. Are you saying I was the reason? She whispered. The woman shook her head quickly, tears glimmering in her own eyes. No, Grace. You were never a curse. You were never meant to be a reason for hatred. But your mother, she couldn't forgive herself, and she couldn't separate her pain from you. Every time she looked at you, she saw all the suffering, all the loss she endured. In her mind, you became the symbol of all the misfortune, the accident that changed everything. She hated the reminder, not the child. Grace's knees shook. A bitter sob escaped her lips, and she buried her face in her hands. All those years, I thought I was worthless. I thought I deserved every slap, every humiliation. Grace looked up, her eyes red and swollen, but something had shifted. A mix of sadness, understanding, and acceptance washed over her. She whispered, barely audible, all these years, I hated her for hating me. And now I see, she was broken before I was even born. And I had to survive that brokenness. The woman squeezed her hand gently. Yes, Grace, you survived. And even though the world may not understand, you turned pain into strength. You became something greater than she ever was capable of being. But it's okay to cry, child. It's okay to mourn the mother you never had. Grace let out a long, shuddering breath. The tears came freely now, not of anger, but of release, years of misunderstanding, bitterness, and loneliness finally spilling out. She cried for herself, for the child she once was, and even, strangely, for the mother who had hurt her. She realized, in that moment, that the story of her mother's hatred was not about her worth. It was about grief, misfortune, and the human heart breaking in ways no child could fix. And though the revelation could not undo the past, it gave her a final piece of understanding, a somber, painful truth that freed her heart, even in a prison cell. Grace sat quietly, alive in every memory, every lesson, every pain endured. She was a product of hatred and survival, bitter yet brilliant, strong yet broken, and a silent warning to anyone who thought cruelty could be hidden. Do not hate your child. Do not abandon them. Absence, neglect, and cruelty have consequences beyond imagination. Do not sow cruelty, because the seeds you plant will grow in ways you cannot imagine.